Let's be real. We're in the middle of an AI explosion. We're seeing trillion-dollar companies pop up, fortunes being made practically overnight, and everyone's telling us this is going to change everything. But here's the big question. Is this a genuine revolution, maybe the greatest investment opportunity of our lifetime, or are we just watching a massive, classic financial bubble inflate, getting ready to pop? Let's break it down.
Okay, to really get our heads around this, we're going to look at it from 4 different angles. First up, we'll dive into the sheer scale of what's being called the AI gold rush. Then we'll see how this whole boom sounds eerily similar to some of the great financial bubbles of the past. After that, we'll dig into the new power structure. Who's really calling the shots in the AI industry today? And finally, we'll tackle the huge dilemma that every single investor is facing right now.
All right, let's start with the euphoria, because there's no denying that the excitement around AI isn't just a bunch of talk. It's actively reshaping our economy, like right now, in real time.
You know, the legendary investor Howard Marks really hits the nail on the head with this. He says every great bubble kicks off with something that feels revolutionary. It creates a few early winners, and that in turn sparks this intense fear of missing out, or FOMO, in everybody else. We've seen this pattern play out over and over again. The real question is, are we just living through the latest version of it?
And look, the numbers here are just staggering. AI isn't some sideshow, it's the main event. It's responsible for a huge chunk of US GDP growth, it's driving the vast majority of all the gains in the S&P 500, and it's where companies are pouring a massive portion of their spending. This isn't just one sector booming, it's a force that's lifting the entire market. And if you want a perfect symbol for the fortunes being made, just look at this number. NVIDIA, the company making the chips that are the backbone of this whole revolution, has seen its value multiplied by about 8,000 times since it went public. That's an average return of around 40% a year, every single year for over 25 years. I mean, that's the kind of insane growth that fuels a frenzy.
Okay, so the upside is pretty clear. Huge. But now we've got to pump the brakes a little and ask some tough questions. Let's pull back and look at history, because the past has some pretty serious warnings for us.
You know, from the railroad boom in the 1800s to the dot-com mania in the late 90s, we've kind of seen this movie before, haven't we? A world-changing technology shows up, investors go wild, they build way too much of it, and then bang, a painful crash that just wipes people out. So are we just repeating the same exact pattern?
To really get the risk here, Howard Marks gives us this crucial distinction. See, not all bubbles are created equal. You have mean reversion bubbles, which are basically pure hype with no real substance. But then you have inflection bubbles. These are the tricky ones. They're built on something real, like railroads or the internet. But, and this is the part you cannot miss, they still destroy a massive amount of investor wealth on their way to building the future.
So here's the wild part. Even though they can be financially ruinous for so many people, these inflection bubbles act as these incredible accelerators. They carpet bomb a new technology with so much money that they cram decades of development into just a few years. Yeah, a ton of that cash just goes up in smoke. But what's left behind? It's the foundation for the entire next era of progress.
So let's move away from the financial theory and get down to the reality on the ground. In today's AI market, who's really calling the shots? And where's the money actually going?
To really get a handle on the risk, we have to pop the hood and look at the financial engine of this whole boom. Because the way this build-out is being funded is, well, it's unique, and according to some, it's potentially really unstable.
One of the biggest red flags for skeptics is this phenomenon called circular financing. This is basically when money just seems to be moving around in a closed loop between a few big companies, instead of flowing based on the actual independent economic value of what they're selling.
Here's a perfect example of how this works. Microsoft pours billions into OpenAI. Then, OpenAI turns around and pays billions right back to Microsoft for the cloud computing it needs. Or how about this? NVIDIA invests in AI startups, and those startups immediately use that cash to buy NVIDIA's chips. In fact, Goldman Sachs estimates that this kind of round-tripping could account for a full 15% of NVIDIA's revenue next year. The boom, in a very real way, is funding itself. So why does this circular flow even happen? Well, it's because a tiny handful of companies control all the essential infrastructure. As you can see here, just 3 players, Amazon's AWS, Microsoft's Azure, and Google Cloud, control the vast majority of the cloud computing market. If you're an AI startup, you don't really have a choice. You have to pay one of these giants for the insane amount of computing power you need.
And this market structure creates these massive walls that keep new competitors out. According to a survey of startups, the biggest obstacles are all the things the tech giants have in spades. Huge data sets, crazy expensive computer hardware, and just bottomless pits of money for funding and hiring the best people. It creates this powerful moat that basically protects the companies that are already on top.
And at the core of this whole ecosystem are really just a few key technologies. As you can see, it's machine learning, natural language processing, and of course the large language models that power tools like ChatGPT. And here's the kicker. These are the exact technologies that require the most data and the most expensive computing power, the very things that only the incumbents control.
So, we have a world-changing technology on one hand and a potentially unstable financial structure on the other. For an investor, this creates a profound dilemma. What in the world are you supposed to do?
Let's break down the two sides of the argument. The bulls, the optimists, will tell you this isn't like the dot-com bubble. Today's AI leaders are already massively profitable giants. They have real products with exploding demand and revenue. But the bears will point to all the classic warning signs. The euphoric change-the-world story, the FOMO, the circular financing, and startups raising billions at insane valuations before they even have a product.
So what's the path forward? Howard Marks offers some really practical advice that avoids trying to predict the future. First, don't bet the house. The risk of getting wiped out if this is a bubble is very, very real. Second, don't ignore it completely. The risk of regretting missing one of the biggest technological shifts in history is also real. So what's his advice? Take a balanced, moderate position. Be selective, be careful, and use some sober judgment.
And that leaves us with this final question. If AI follows the path of past inflection bubbles, it will almost certainly change the world for the better. But history shows that progress often comes at a steep price, a price that's paid by the investors who get swept up in the mania. The question we have to ask ourselves is, who is going to pay that price this time?